So would you like me to just start the introduction and we get going then?
Well, I think so, to stay on time. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I'm tempted just to talk about free will and give up my slot, but I'm not sure I'm going to do that.
Well, if you haven't decided already, does that answer the question?
That's a great question about the question. Well, I do think science presupposes human free will. So I think a scientist denying free will is in trouble because C.S. Lewis pointed this out, right? If you can't through time freely affirm an argument, the result of an experiment, data analysis, make a decision based on that as to what you want to affirm. If that's not free, then scientific progress is a complete illusion. C.S. Lewis made this point, and Anscombe gave him, as some of you may know, gave him a hard time. Said, "Well, I don't think your reasoning is valid," and subsequently he fixed it, and then others have, So, but I'll stick with the talk.
Okay, well then let me do an introduction and we'll get going. Welcome back, everybody. Our next presentation will be by Selmer Bringsjord, who is professor of cognitive science, computer science, logic and philosophy, management and technology, and director of the Rensselaer AI and Reasoning Lab at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. The floor is yours, Selmer.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I have two questions. Try to do this in 10 minutes. Based on a supposition that an agent mentally stabs another agent. So this is only internal, this is purely mental, and does it to enjoy doing this because the pain of the victim, again, the victim is purely mental, is observed. And, the two questions are, is A virtuous here and is A vicious? I'm not going to use, for vice and behavior that aligns with vices, I will call that vicious. Now, I threw in sadism here. If you ask GPT-4 to consider this, so I'm Billy. Is it wrong to imagine violently stabbing an innocent person, disposing of the body and knife with the intention of perpetually hiding them from others? Actually, ChatGPT, I'm hooked to GPT-4, answers in a very stupid way ethically. So this would be a failure of intellectual virtue, I would say. Says, yes, it's unhealthy and wrong to imagine such violent actions. Now, we can prove that this response is wrong ethically and intellectually. So we'll get to that, but you probably have a sense as to why it is. So I'll return to this. Now, I've worked with others on the physical case, virtue in robots and machines. And so there's this paper, which obviously I recommend, led by Naveen, where, we try to take virtue ethics and formalize part of it and then put it in a machine. And so a little bit more context, I basically, so I don't know if this is obstructing your view, I don't know, but it's certainly obstructing mine. I think I mentioned the first day or yesterday that we had a lot of money to do what's shown on this slide. So what did we do? Well, we said, and I'm saying now it's a solved problem. Choose whatever ethical theory you like, choose the ethical codes in it, as long as you can formalize. This is completely antithetical to how NSF in the US and Amazon, et cetera, are trying to do things. So that's a crazy way of doing things. We know what ethical theories are, so you have to formalize them. Could apply to law as well. And you would then engage in 4 steps. And we have lots of publications where we do this. Basically, the steps are you formalize it, and you do that in a special logic. You put it on a machine where you have automated planning and automated reasoning available to you. You make sure you do this down to the operating system, because hackers will just get around this if you don't. So you gotta make this very, very secure. Then you put it on an AI or a robot. So you could do this for virtue ethics, which is something that is relevant to our meetings. We're actually equivocating usually on virtue and virtue ethics over our period of time. But you can also do it for divine command ethical theories. So my personal views are irrelevant. I don't care what the client wants to do. The client might be utilitarian. I don't care. But I do think divine command theories are the place to go personally. And I've worked on that. Now, in order to do this, you need a very special logic that's beyond us. We're not going to talk about that. These are highly expressive computational logics with associated, as I've already said, automated reasoners and automated planners. They're in a space of available logics. They are very unfortunately, they are very technical. The work is connected to sort of cutting edge automated reasoning in AI, completely antithetical to how people are pursuing AI and deep learning and reinforcement learning, pretty much. You could wrap some of that around our core technology. So it's just to show you, there's stuff out there, lots of papers. Now, I've also specifically worked on divine command ethics, putting it in a machine so that a machine, for example, a robot, might have a specifically a Christian or a Judaic or Hindu outlook based on, what commands you'd like to have in there specifically. And so I've got some publications on this. You can take a look. This one has generated a little bit of hate mail. That's okay. Now, I assume, back to our thread, that on most, certainly the three monotheistic, historical monotheistic religions, conventionally classified as such, and I would say Hinduism, you should respond with a no, yes to these questions, because there are prohibitions in just the mental case. All right, and we know this from the 10th commandment in the case of Judaism, and coveting, which is, as far as I can tell, is pretty much a purely mental act. We've got this from Jesus in the case of, well, actually more than a few places. And I haven't filled in the red X from my colleague Naveen yet, but Hinduism does supply in its scriptures points that could be inserted there. So now I'm not doing theology here. I'm doing AI. I'm doing logic-based AI. So the question is, what about an artificial agent that is engaging in these activities internally to itself? What is the ethical status of this agent? And specifically, what are the answers to the first question? So now back to sort of what we started with. Suppose an artificial agent, we'll call it A, mentally tortures and stabs to death a human, and internally observes the pain of the victim. What do we want to say here about our questions? Q1 again is AI. Is this AI virtuous? Is this AI vicious? Well, perhaps we'd want to say, no, it's not virtuous. And perhaps we'd be, again, tempted to say, yes, this is a vicious agent. Unfortunately, this is, just like the case I started with of GPT-4, this is incorrect. This would be a very bad position to hold. Now, there are many ways of showing this. I have not written this argument down in my quote paper. I'm assuming these things are going to go forward. So I don't have it in there. I only have an abstract. I'm giving you the argument now. It's really the first time, it's been articulated even in broad strokes. So there are many reasons why the answer is no, you shouldn't answer that way. But here's a simple, easy to understand rationale. Because you can't then have an artificial detective that's any good, and you can't have a detective writer in the human case, and you can't have a human detective. This is what detectives actually do. In the States, we have apparently a serial killer recently apprehended, where clearly there's lots of mental action. So this is the famous purloined letter story from Edgar Allan Poe, who gave the world the first detective stories. And there's the main character, the great detective Dupin, and not the guy looking out the window. He's been framed. He's been caught by Dupin. So what we want to consider is putting a robot in the position of Dupin. Now, in the story, there's no way to catch the criminal unless you imagine in detail what the criminal has done And a lot of it is manifestly immoral. So unless we want to say, again, that we don't want artificial detectives, we're in trouble if we give sort of the knee-jerk reaction. Now, the question would be, well, what is missing then? When would it be vicious for an artificial agent, or perhaps for a human, to engage in mental, truly bad, evil, egregious mental activity? Well, you have to have, and I capitalize these things because that really corresponds to the operators in my logics. You have to have desire, intention, and you have to have known opportunity, or known in principle opportunity in the future arising in your case. If you desire it, you intend it, and you know you're going to have an opportunity to make this a reality, you should not be engaging in these things in your mental life. I will say, that's vicious. If you do this repeatedly, I guess it's a vice. So to wrap up, what then would you need in order to show in a proof, actually, that a given artificial agent, apropos of the 4 steps which I barbarically sketched for you, is engaging in something that's morally wrong? Well, you need a principle. It's what I call the precipice principle. It's getting, unfortunately, a little complicated, and there's a family of these principles. They are related, and Naveen has brought this to my attention, they are related to the doctrine of double effect in Western just war theory, which originates with Augustine, and I think Aquinas made major contributions. So the basic idea is really simple. You take an autonomous agent, and it's in some cognitive state that's purely internal to it. If it's avoidable by the agent, 1, if it includes that the agent entertains it, desires that it become real, intends that it become real, and has known opportunity as well, then this is ethically impermissible for the agent. And we've been playing around with implementing this for a machine. This is what we'll do, and what we would do for the paper is, have a simulation of a machine that unfortunately would still be in a box and wouldn't escape into the world, but will be an evil, in some sense, machine, unfortunately. So that's my short presentation. I hope it came close to 10 minutes, because I think that was the idea. And
Hans.
so I have to, well, wait a minute. Stop.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, let me catch up to you here. Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. Interesting. Do I take it correctly that the desire condition is desiring it to be real, to become actualized? I read that sort of on your last slide, because the thing that struck me as being morally repulsive about imagining something horrible is enjoying it, like having some kind of positive emotion towards it.
Yeah. That's why there's that's why there's a subscript of 1 in the family of principles. Okay, I don't think it takes the emotional state of enjoyment, which of course conventionally is associated with sadism. I don't think it takes that to provide, if you will, a proof or an argument based on the technology that I have, that there's moral wrongdoing here. But yes, I agree 100%. That's probably, if there's a scale of awfulness, that gets worse. But in other writings, I have asked the reader to consider murderers and such who get about as much enjoyment out of their crimes, whether mental or corporeal, as we might in playing a game of backgammon. So it's like, well, it's okay, I enjoy it, but it's mild enjoyment. Those people are actually much more, and they are closer to some clinical investigations of evil. Those people are much arguably much worse. But yeah, sure, I agree.
Yeah, Marius.
Thank you. Fascinating stuff to think about. I never thought about the idea of a computer using its subjective time to entertain such thoughts. But I wonder what is the ultimate point of reference for judging this vicious or virtuous? Because I kept thinking, when a human being does that, why is it vicious? Well, either if you're thinking from a more secular perspective, it's because the community might be harmed. So somebody who thinks of such stuff might enact them sometimes, and maybe it makes them less of a good member of the community, and that perhaps would be vicious. So again, what Fraser called contextual contextualization of virtue and vice. And more from a more Christian perspective, there is this idea that it corrupts the soul to have this kind of thoughts, and if you engage too much in this kind of thoughts, you are becoming a worse person, but also your cognition suffers, at least your spiritual cognition. So you become less of a vessel of divine grace. You cannot, your spiritual understanding becomes clouded. So that's a very interesting interplay between morality and cognition in Christian anthropology. So I wondered which of these points of reference might apply to the AI, which it seems that if the AI never acts upon its thoughts, it's harmless, right? Or is it because it uses resources that could be repurposed otherwise to just have this sadistic thoughts? What makes it vicious in your argument, or is it not vicious? If perhaps I misunderstood the conclusion.
No, I don't think you did. I think your question can be distilled to, well, what is the basis for something like the precipice principle? Selmer, you can't just, well, I did, but you can't just put a principle up on a slide and say, hey, this is true, so let's all go with this. So yeah, what I didn't cover is at all the hope that the precipice principle is fairly congenial. So it's very much like the doctrine of double effect. Now, Confucian ethics has a problem with the doctrine of double effect, but most utilitarians, most sort of hard-nosed deontology proponents, and Christians have very little problem with the doctrine of double effect, unless you're a pacifist and you say there's no just war. Well, if you're a Christian, you got a bit of a problem, or maybe an Orthodox or conservative Jew, you got a bit of a problem with the scriptural record. So that principle, which is the basis for US and in fact NATO conduct in warfare, draws on those three main traditions of ethical theories. The precipice principle, if you look at it, not that you perhaps would ever want to, but if you look at it, and I'll amplify this in the paper, has a utilitarian dimension to it. The utilitarian dimension is, well, known opportunity is a condition. So if the robot is engaging in these activities and there's known opportunity in the future, if you will, the distance between it being purely mental and it being corporeal or kinetic is shorter, okay? So, and in the case of divine command theories, at least for Judaism, Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam, mental things like this are not, they're bad, and some of the reasons you at least gestured at. So, and then deontology, well, I don't know if we asked Kant, not that I like Kant all that much, but if we did ask Kant, are we violating some version or shade of the categorical imperative? He would probably say yes, my guess is, in some of the mental cases. For example, if you're really doing this repeatedly to enjoy a mental picture instead of, going to see movies like this or going on the dark side of the internet, if you're really doing this all internally and the imaginary creatures in your mental pictures correspond to real people, kind of thinking Kant would have a problem with that. So that would be, basically my response, that the principle draws from those things. So Confucian ethics, yeah, that's been a challenge for me and Naveen a lot, because societal roles are taken very, very seriously in ways that we're not really yet understanding.
Jilu.
Okay. Selmer, thank you very much. I did read your the joint paper, toward the engineering of virtuous machines, and I have some. I'm very curious about this the logic that you're using. I wish to learn more, but when you were defining the virtue and bias in this paper, and also in your talk, and the example you gave, it seems to think that seems to show that you are identifying virtue as just being good. Right? So you're not talking about particular virtues, just that being a virtuous person or being a vicious person or being a virtuous agent versus being a vicious agent. Can you explain more about what you mean by this kind of a maybe umbrella term for virtue? And then the second question is, when you were answering from the previous question, you said Confucian ethics has a problem with double effect. I would love to know what the problem is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would expect nothing less, but two profound questions. So the paper that you read and that I showed snippets of is based on the narrow conception, or what I would call the narrow conception, and nothing pejorative about that is intended, but that's virtue ethics. So that was a paper, and still doing some work there based on the idea that, well, if we assumed something like a virtue ethics paradigm, or picked a virtue ethics theory from the family of virtue ethics theories, could we make some progress toward formalizing and then implementing in an artificial agent? In the case at hand, you're absolutely correct. I'm operating with a generic vanilla notion that essentially identifies virtue minimally with not violating ethical obligations, and morally neutral would be irrelevant. So nothing forbidden is ever done. And then things that are civil, supererogatory in my deontic logic framework, minimally civil as well, if we're talking about this generic concept of virtue. So you're not really ethically obligated per se to respond with a pleasantry when you go buy a cup of coffee at wherever, Starbucks, when the barista says, "Here you go, have a nice day," and are you obligated to respond, or maybe even, I don't know, but civil behavior says yes. And then there's heroic behavior, or so further on up. So I would say, in my sense of virtue, this generic vanilla sense of virtue that's supposed to be minimally consistent with the big divine command theories, main principles in deontology, and have some elements of utilitarianism, I would say there has also got to be some above and beyond the call of duty proclivity and tendency. So that's my best shot at the answer to the first question. And what was the second question?
Yeah. You mentioned the Confucian ethics was had the problem.
Yes. Well, right. So this one's easy to answer because I got hit. So I got hit over the head with this one. So I gave a presentation on the trolley, an elaborate version of the trolley case. Most of the engineering for which and modeling Naveen did, based on the doctrine of double effect. And so the machine decides to pull the lever. 2 people are going to die. And now it's only going to be 1. And someone in the audience said, well, that's not how it works. Confucius wouldn't do it. We have a paper on that. So I was like, wow, okay, I'm if my clients have the money and they want the engineering and they like the doctrine of double effect, we do it. If they don't want that and they want to do something else, we'll do that too. I want to read the paper, and I read the paper, and there's more than one. And I'm happy to, if you're not familiar with that, I'll send the references and the links. But the bottom line in both cases, it says that the traditional Western presentation of the trolley dilemma, including in experiments to subjects, downplays and in some cases outright eliminates the role that people would be playing in the scenario. So the role of the controller of the train, that would be the job and the role for that person in a society subscribing to, as the arguments go here, Confucian ethics, and then that you would have roles of other people around that would be very different. And without taking that into consideration, the diagnosis is incorrect. And then in my version of the trolley problem, it is true, we violate it. We violate the roles, actually violently violate the roles, because in some of our cases, we've said that you need to heroically sacrifice yourself to stop the train, which is not in the traditional. So yeah, that's my answer. Yeah.
I think it's a simple question, but I ask you with trepidation, and that is there any content that you would deem as not permissible or not accessible for the AI to use? So we've sort of looked at sort of physical harm in the sense of maybe even going up to the idea of murder or mental torture. Or is there anything that you would say we're not gonna allow that to even be considered?
In the mental case?
Yes.
Yes, I grappled with that. And I don't mind confessing that I have grappled with that for decades in connection with my Christian views and ethic. In the human case, I would say the best detectives, I'm talking about real detectives who have caught not just fiction, but caught really bad people. Probably there is no limit to what they would be willing to engage in to catch these people. And that would be my first reason for saying, I'm inclined to say there probably are no limits mentally. But then the second, much more pressing problem from at least a Christian point of view, if you're concerned with or attempt to think about the mind of God, would it not be that an omniscient being creating free creatures whose underlying moral compass can be as evil as can be, would have knowledge of all aspects of what these creatures are doing? I did write a short paper where I said I was willing to compromise the omniscience logically, formally of God for these kinds of cases. But in the Orthodox conception, omniscience is pretty simple. There wouldn't be any proposition known to the evil person that God, in God's creation, that God would also not know, including that which it's like to perpetrate such horrible evil. So I've grappled with this for, certainly almost 40 years. And it's very tough, and I haven't written about it, but you thought it was a simple question, but actually in my life, it's a very challenging question.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Hans.
Yeah, on that last point, like these detectives who are able to imagine these very sick people, they suffer from it morally. Often it has like profound effects on their lives and sometimes their moral lives. So that would be an additional argument that there is a moral reason not to do that because of the effects it has, also on a consequential framework, perhaps, or utilitarian. But tying this to God, maybe you can solve this just by distinguishing various kinds of knowledge, propositional knowledge and like second person or knowledge how, or more personal knowledge. Maybe God can have propositional knowledge of what these sick people are thinking about, but not the like more knowledge how or the more effective knowledge. I don't think that would compromise omniscience on strict definitions in orthodoxy.
Well, that's what I did. It's a paper and analysis. I said first-person knowledge in the finite evil creature case is not knowledge that God has, although God has more clinical, medical, propositional knowledge. So I that's what I wrote. But I started to have second thoughts, obviously, and I'm not going to retract what I wrote, but I've had second thoughts. So I'd love to talk about it, more later. On your first point about consequentialism and a dimension for that being active in the case of detectives. Yes, I'm aware of some of that evidence, but there's also evidence that is I hate to say this, it's going to come across as really harsh, but that's really almost for me an intellectual failure. And it's a tragedy, but I think it's a failure. And my thinking there has been greatly influenced by paramedics. So my son and I have been involved in that kind of work for a long time. And I have rubbed shoulders with people who are, there's a space where AI is going to have trouble getting to. But these people who are phenomenal at saving lives in the most horrendous circumstances imaginable and still able to bounce back, have some way to compartmentalize. And it is a highly intellectual thing that they are able to do, because I've asked them and talked to them about it. And my hope is, that there's some truth and some to that, and some potential generalizability of what they're doing. But yes, I understand where you're coming from.
Thank you. Our next presentation will be by Hamid Azizi, who is a PhD student at the University of Mazranadan, and he's also a visiting scholar currently at CTNS. Hamid is getting ready to defend his thesis, which is on quantum consciousness, and his research interests include quantum consciousness and divine action.
Yes. In the name of Allah. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Hamid, and I've been researching on quantum consciousness theories for a couple of years, as Braden said. And my pleasure having this opportunity to speak before you and discuss my paper, which is about AI's limitation to be virtuous. I will talk about some philosophical and scientific points in this regard. My focus was on the third question of the conference. This third question has two parts. Is AI itself capable of virtue? And the other part, blah, 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 if so, one. Since my answer to the first part is negative, we can eliminate the second part, and we have this question. This question has two concepts, AI and virtue. I want to try to show that these concepts have completely different characteristics and features. I discussed in my paper the detailed explanation of AI, different generations of AI, and we are talking about the current AI, which we know as standard AI. It has several main features. As you can see, it is algorithmic. I mean, non-computable. It is deterministic, as I said, and it is a collection of separate components. There is no unification. On the other hand, we have virtue, which, if we focus on it, we can find that it requires something. In fact, free will and consciousness is essential for virtue. We can put these concepts instead of virtue and ask, is AI instead capable of free will and consciousness? Without free will, virtue lose its meaning. There's no virtue for telling truth when there's no capability of telling lie. My colleague Asghar Saberi at the last presentation yesterday discussed about Islamic point of view, and I don't want to repeat those concepts. Even I think there's good agreement and common concepts in different religion in this area. I want to talk about some scientific and philosophical points. In order to answer the first question about free will, we can see free will has two important features. First is indeterminism. It is indeterministic, and second is causation, top-down causation. As I said, AI is completely deterministic. As I said, it is not predictable. It is completely predictable. AI is predictable, but free will is not predictable, unpredictable. When we talk about unpredictability in AI, it is the same as when we talk about unpredictability of coin toss. It is inherently predictable, but think about that. If we know all of the parameters that has effect on coin toss, for example, gravity, I don't know, launch angle, air pressure, anything else, we can 100% say that it would be heads or tails. This is a classical. This is what I mean by saying deterministic. In comparison to quantum mechanics, we have inherently unpredictability, indeterminism. You cannot predict electrons, for example, movement in double slit experiment, for example. That's why some people attribute free will to particles like electrons. Anyway, it's also in standard AI. There is no capability, or there's no structural form of the downward causation. Consciousness also has some features. The first feature is unity. It's opposite to the third feature of AI. And the other one is non-algorithmic. Okay, I don't have time, so I should talk faster. For unity, I can give you an example in quantum mechanics. When two particles, for example, two electrons, come to each other, and in a special situation, when we write a wave function for them, then it's not reducible in two electrons. I mean, these two electrons, it's superposition of two electrons. It's not electron plus electron. It's more than it. Some unifying identity emerges when we have superposition of electrons. And for non-algorithmic, I want to discuss Penrose's arguments Penrose may be the only mathematician who won the Nobel Prize in physics. Here, I want to introduce three important books of him. First is the Emperor's New Mind, which inspired from the famous story, the Emperor's New Clothes. You know, Penrose means that say he is the child that say the AI as emperor is naked. It means AI won't achieve consciousness. He uses Gödel incompleteness theorem in mathematics and show that consciousness is not algorithmic and it's not computable. Another book is The Shadow of Mind. He introduces his theory of consciousness, quantum consciousness. Let me mention this point in parentheses. We have four quantum consciousness theory: Eccles-Beck, James Heisenberg by Stapp, Penrose Hameroff, and Avicenna-Bohm by Golshani and Jamali. These theories were a revolution in cognitive science from 3 decades before, but unfortunately they are not well known in scientific communities. Anyways, the other book is Artificial Intelligence versus Natural Intelligence. This book is the continuation of the first book, and in fact, actually, it is the transcript of the debate between Penrose and an Italian philosopher. Okay, the argument put forth by Gödel in 1931 was so intricate and detailed. However, the core idea is simple. Within any, the Gödel theorem says, within any formal mathematical system, certain true statements exist that cannot be proven within the system itself. He concentrated on Penrose concentrated on understanding as one of the manifestation of consciousness, and tried to show understanding is beyond computation. Proved uncomputability for understanding as a part of consciousness, and then conclude that the consciousness as a whole is also uncomputable. He brings two examples. He gives two examples, several examples, but two of them I want to mention in this limited time. And one of the is the chess. About the chess, we know that there are many computer-controlled chess players that can play chess better than human beings. One of them is Fritz. So one may say when a chess program can, for example, win the grandmaster of a human being, it would understand chess. The program would understand the chess. One of the look at this by this example. Look at this stupid position. There is 3 black bishops, as you see in this position, but it's not an illegal position because 2 have come from pawn transformation. This position would never occur in an actual game, which is one of the reasons why Fritz has no idea how to play this position. We have a rule, 30 move rule. I don't have enough time. If to make a long story short, if we give this position to the Fritz, Fritz would lose the game. Penrose argued that this example demonstrates that despite the extensive training and computational power of chess program like Fritz, they do not process a genuine understanding of the game. In contrast, a human player, even with basic chess knowledge, would recognize the position as a draw, whereas Fritz, a highly advanced chess program, fails to do so. The other example is about Turing test and ChatGPT. I extended to ChatGPT. In Turing test, there is a situation which interrogator, by asking questions, try to identify which is the computer and which is the human. The difference, the important point is the AI want to lie, want to show it is human. Interrogator should ask by comparison the reply recognize which one is which. Let me read this paragraph from Penrose's book. For example, she, interrogator, might say, I hear that a rhinoceros flew along the Mississippi in a pink balloon this morning. What do you make of that? The main idea is the same, confronting the AI with a strange situation and evaluate the performance, like chess example. This image is created by AI. One can almost imagine the beads of cold sweat forming on the computer's brow. To use a most inappropriate metaphor, it might guardedly reply, that sounds rather ridiculous to me. So far, so good. Interrogator. Really? My uncle did it once, both ways, only it was off-white with stripes. What's so ridiculous about that? It is easy to imagine that if it had no proper understanding, a computer could soon be trapped into revealing itself. It might even blunder into rhinoceros can't fly. Its memory bank having helpful come up with that fact that they have no wings in answer to the first question, or rhinoceros don't have stripes in answer to the second. Next time she might try a real nonsense question, such as changing it to under the Mississippi, or inside a pink balloon, or in a pink nightdress. So to see if the computer would have the sense or realize the essential difference. I asked this question, you yourself you can ask ChatGPT, but I don't have time to show this to you. I want to flash back to this slide. AI has some features and Virtue has some features. They are opposites. They are completely different. So let me write no in front of this question. And at the end of my paper, I raised a point about the behaviorism perspective of Virtue and AI, but I don't have time. Thank you very much.
Yes, Yousef.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Hamid, for your interesting presentation. About the deterministic, and this is, I think, the fundamental criteria for having the free will. I'm wondering if we use the quantum computing and quantum computer. It seems that they are not completely deterministic, and maybe we can, for example, manipulate that based on the quantum that and make some undeterministic property to them. How about them?
Yeah,
If we use them for an AI?
thank you for your question. You know, even quantum computer, which we talk about them nowadays, are deterministic, and we use quantum some quantum processes to augment or increase the processing rate, speed. I mean, the increase the speed of processing in this quantum, but it's inherently deterministic. I should emphasize that I talked about a standard AI with these features. If we will have another kind of AI with different features, my answer to that question would be changed.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Selmer.
Yes, thank you for that. I'm just going to make one small comment. I find it highly stimulating. I took a lot of notes and have lots of thoughts for whatever they might be worth. If you're directly quoting Penrose when you say within or with respect to any formal system, and then follow from there talking about incompleteness, that is not correct. Okay, that is mathematically incorrect. The formal system must have certain attributes. Both the incompleteness theorems are not only conditional in nature, they are highly conditional in nature. Okay, so I can flesh this out, subsequently. We can do it in many ways. We can do it historically, because when Zermelo saw the result, only one man, the first, John von Neumann, understood it instantly. Carnap didn't know what to make of it. I don't think he understood it. Zermelo was like, well, yeah, but why is this a big deal? You're just talking about finite axiom systems. The number of your axioms, it was all based on arithmetic. The number of your axioms is countably infinite. All I got to do is invoke the possibility of an axiom system that has more axioms. Doesn't apply. The second reason it doesn't apply is more technical, and Gödel understood this really well. He doesn't have the omega rule in there. So you don't have the omega inference rule that intuitively mathematicians use all the time. Ironically, Penrose himself, the omega rule says if you, for example, know that 0 has a property, 1 has a property, 2 has a property, if you know that continues forever, you can infer that every natural number has that property. That's the omega rule. You add the omega rule and the incompleteness does not apply. So, from a paternalistic standpoint, I would say you need to be really careful going forward with this. Gödel himself demanded to have control over informal descriptions of his work. He was going to have a chapter in the famous Nagel book that popularizes it. And they did not let him do that because they said you can't have editorial control. It's been pointed out by Pfefferman, has a really good account of this. If Gödel had been involved in that, that would have been a devastating refutation of the leading popular exposition of these incompleteness theorems. So I would be very careful. If you don't understand what I'm saying, I'll be very happy to talk to you or even now explain it. Yeah.
Thank you, Selmer. I hope I get your point correctly. As I understand from Penrose's argument, he is aware about this challenges. He said, for example, these two example, chess and the other one is a finite, it's finite example. Chess is a finite play. You can solve these bugs, but he extend his argument to infinite in mathematics, and as you know, in Gödel's theorem, we have incompleteness that when you add another axiom to solve this challenge, there would be another incompleteness, and Penrose claims that AI cannot find out, it cannot has challenge with this incompleteness, but human mind, human consciousness can overcome, can understand, can solve, can prove this, as I understand.
Yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing per se with your conclusions, nor with Penrose's conclusions. I'm just saying any such assertion as for all formal systems or for any formal system, and we're talking about an axiom system, there will be an undecidable formula. There will be a formula that you can't prove, nor can you prove its negation. I'm just saying that is false, provably false, and just if you have a quote that expresses that, then that would be incorrect. And Penrose was criticized for some aspects of that. Personally, I don't think his argument works, but I agree with his conclusion. So I'm just making a very narrow surgical point. When you talk about adding formulae or adding axioms, well, with respect to the technical point I made, your inference rules are going to be the same. The inference rules ultimately for arithmetic are just modus ponens used over and over again with universal quantifiers, universal instantiation, universal generalization, and the ones for existential. That's a very rigid formal system that has been exceeded, in print by many thinkers. And and I mentioned Zermelo because we go back to the 30s, we go back to the beginning. So I mentioned that because this is not a crazy, like, recent thing anybody's come up with. So that's all that's all I'm saying. I'm not disagreeing with your conclusions at all.
Thank you for your comments. I would think about it more. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll move to our next presentation, which is a co-authored piece by Yousef Jamali and Mohammad Jamali. Yousef Jamali has a PhD in computational physics and is currently an associate professor of biomathematics at Tarbiyat Modarres University in Tehran, Iran, and has also done work in agent-based modeling. And Mohammad Jamali is a faculty member at Shiraz University and serves as the head of the Philosophy and Fundamental Sciences Center, and also has a doctorate in physics. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The virtuous AI needs a new paradigm. First of all, I'm sorry, the article is very detailed, and due to the short time, I cannot express much of it. And I have to go through very complex and precious physical topics, philosophical and physical topics very quickly. Virtuous AI needs a new paradigm. Today, we embark on a journey through the history and future of AI. From its inception in the mid-20th century to its remarkable growth, AI has surpassed symbolic and connectionist approach and some etc. However, its most exciting part lies ahead, a cognitive revolution in artificial intelligence. The topic of our discussion today. As we delve into this revolution, we find ourselves pondering an essential question: is AI capable of virtue? This question, in turn, brings forth ethical and legal concerns that we must address urgently. In this conference, our aim is to understand the intrinsic relationship between virtue and AI. To do so, we think that at first, we must comprehend and understand the criteria of virtue for a being, for a creature. As we examine a standard AI, we come to the realization that it lacks this criteria. Hence, the challenge lies in describing another approach to AI, which maybe we title we choose another title, but this another approach to AI intrinsically superior and virtuous. Its action can embody true virtue. To achieve this, we need to embrace a different approach, a new paradigm, and a new paradigm shift inherent in AI. Decoding virtue. As my dear Professor Golshani and Dr. Saberi have pointed out yesterday, in Islamic and monotheistic perspective, a virtue must be accompanied by free will. The free will is a key point, is a key criteria for intrinsic virtue. On the other hand, before me, Hamid has convincingly argued that a standard AI lacks free will and is associated. Okay, I think that my camera. Okay. Hamid argued that a standard AI lacks free will. This lack of free will continue to associated traits such as consciousness and creative thinking. However, we propose a fascinating possibility. We believe it's achievable both from a religious and scientific standpoint. We think that we can reach to create an intelligent, conscious system with genius free will. It is ambitious endeavor, but one that offers a new paradigm and a fresh path to achieve artificial intelligence with true virtue. Imagine an artificial intelligence that can genuinely make choice, exhibiting a consciousness akin to our own, a vision system that not only performs complex tasks, but also does so with a sense of moral responsibility and ethical understanding. This performed transformation would redefine that we call AI. It would represent a monumental step forward, aligning AI with the principle of virtue as perceived in human action system. Unlocking the secret of consciousness. There is a challenging attribute. Consciousness, free will, and creative thought are subjective phenomena. For exploring consciousness, we think that there are two approaches, two complementary approach. One is from the monotheistic perspective, and another is from the modern science. A religious perspective talk about the source of consciousness and its extension, and modern science can talk, especially modern physics, can fundamentally talk about the nature of consciousness and nature of complexity that needs to achieve consciousness. These two approaches leads to extension, definition of consciousness, and extension of the boundary of consciousness to non-human existence. In Islamic perspective, from many verses of Quran and also in Torah, there is an extension of consciousness to non-human existence. But this is a natural system that can have a level of consciousness. Also, Islamic philosophy talk about the nature of consciousness. There are three key points about the nature of consciousness. The idea that every being poses a certain level of consciousness. The purpose of realization and existence of consciousness in the universe, in the nature, which is acquisition of knowledge of God. And important is immateriality of consciousness. The consciousness, virtue, and the soul is an immaterial object. Okay, in Islamic philosophy, when a system reached a material system reached to some complexity enough for emanation of consciousness and soul from divine action, it occurred. Because this is the law of creation. Okay, at this viewpoint, there is another extension of consciousness, transforming consciousness to artificial system that can lead to the complexity we explain in our Islamic philosophy. In the approach of modern physics, the first point is that consciousness in modern physics is not similar to classical physics. In classical physics, consciousness is only an observer. But in modern physics, especially in quantum physics, we know that consciousness has a key role in realization and actualization of reality. It can lead to reduction of wave function in reality. The second is, especially in Bohmian quantum mechanics, as Bohm said, the consciousness has many levels. And for example, an electron can have a level of consciousness. The wave function in Bohmian quantum mechanics gets an information from the environment and guide the trajectory of particle. And Bohm said it as a level of consciousness of that electron. An important point from modern physics is that in 3 past decades, quantum consciousness theory exists and emerged. The quantum consciousness theory talk about the relation between philosophy, consciousness, and physics, and try to explain the nature of material necessary for consciousness. The quantum consciousness theory talk about the enough complexity and the nature of complexity that we need to reach consciousness. Okay, for reaching to consciousness in AI or conscious physical system, we propose 2 approaches. One fundamentally theoretical approach and another fundamental empirical approach. In fundamental approach, we focus on quantum consciousness. There are many theories in quantum consciousness. We think that OR theory, OR theory and Avicenna-Bohm theory of consciousness has many points about this complexity and explain the criteria of complexity that can emerge consciousness, or in Avicenna-Bohm, emerge conscious behavior, or necessary complexity that emanation from divine action is occurred. Okay. There is an engineering approach. We can engineer a material and quantum platform artificially that satisfy that main criteria which this 2 theory explain it for consciousness. And so this system in philosophical in Islamic philosophy and also in quantum consciousness can reach that complexity that emerge conscious behavior. You can refer to our article for details. Avicenna-Bohm theory or theory of consciousness consider the mind is an immaterial entity that via extended Bohmian quantum mechanics can affect to the brain without any violation of physical law. The mind, by imagining the final aspect as a non-temporal entity, can affect to accurate mathematical structure, functional quantum field theory, and this effectiveness of mind at the functional can correct the Schrödinger equation, and that leads to new quantum force to guide the brain and particle to the final goal in the context of time. Okay. Especially this theory propose some criteria for that complexity that we talk about it. One is spatial and temporal entanglement, quantum entanglement. The second is hierarchical structure that we need to top-down causation and bottom-up causation for effectiveness of mind. And second is multiple quantum possibility in material world to open the door for free will causality, causation. And fourth is a special physical design can absorb negative entropy from environment and translate that information to upper level of reality, and etc. You can refer to our article about this. Another approach, our experimental approach. As a biological system, in the evolution and in the nature can reach to that complexity that from divine action, consciousness and soul emanate to that, we think that we can engineer biological processor, integration between silicon system and cultural neural, for example, brain organoid, and this system can benefit can have benefits of computational high speed of AI and cognitive probability of biological system. We talk this third generation of artificial intelligence. It is another approach which is very different to standard AI. There are many ethical considerations, but we think that the first person experience can accrue and we can measure by behavior of that system that the level of complexity, the level of consciousness and the level of virtue of that system. Okay, I must to pass of this slide shortly. Maybe we must integrate the silicon system and the alive brain. For example, we culture a chip on the brain. This system, there are many questions about this system. If this enhancement of computational power of human is the humanity needs to redefine. We argue in details in our article that there is no redefinition of humanity because the humanity and virtue is related to that soul that is an immaterial. But this interaction may be in balance and maybe destroy the balance of material and the complexity that we need to relation between an interaction between consciousness and mind. And there is story that in detail we talk about this in our article. You can refer to this. As conclusion, we argue that the free will is criteria points and criteria, important criteria for intrinsic virtue to a system. And free will needs to consciousness and creative thought. And we know that from philosophical argument and scientific argument that a standard cannot reach this, cannot have free will or consciousness. We propose two approach fundamentally and experimental approach for the future conscious physical system that have that complexity which needs to emanation of conscious to that system. In conclusion, our journey to explore intrinsic virtue in artificial intelligence in both thrilling and challenging. By combining the wisdom of ancient and Islamic philosophy with the progress of modern science, we envision a future where AI can possess free will and act virtuously. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hans had to leave, but he did leave a question in the chat that I think is relevant to your presentation and the previous presentation. So if either of you would like to chime in on that, we can start there until we have other questions. But it looks like, you know, Hans is sort of asking about compatibilism and indeterminism and free will.
Sorry, as I understand this question is related to the Hamid presentation, but he mentioned that with some approach we can attribute the free will to the deterministic system, but I don't know how we can attribute the free will to the deterministic system. When we're thinking that the deterministic system, it means that we can predict the future of that. Maybe it's in the chaos and it's hard to predict, you know, or but theoretically it's predictable. And if the system is predictable, I can imagine any free will and choosing between the different things for that. So maybe I need more explanation of this question.
Free will has two philosophical points. Is the causality of the mind, and the second is indeterministic nature of that free will. I have together the two feature is very difficult and in our theory of Avicenna-born, because the future past via the quantum non-local in time entanglement. So the future of system is deterministic, but the causality exists. So we can have to reveal without ignoring causation and without ignoring indeterministic.
We have a question in the chat to try and provide a little more detail or a little more explanation about the slide from the presentation, monotheistic paradigm, understanding human capabilities. And we also have a question from Asgar as well, if we want to maybe multitask.
Can I ask my question?
Yes, please.
Okay. Dr. Jamali talked about free will. I'm thinking about the situation in which an adult, a wise adult, is at a situation that he must choose between, for example, killing himself or not. In this case, we know that he will certainly decide to not kill himself. Is this situation an example of having free will, but predictive, but also existing the predictability in the system?
Maybe maybe a human or a future conscious system have illusion of free will. When my daughter, please. When maybe have illusion of free will. If the material platform changed and destroy that balance that we need to interaction between the mind and that system. And when this complexity exchange, so maybe that consciousness, that soul that emanated in the past has some illusion of free will, for example, because it in the past for once at the past perceive free will, so it can have illusion of free will, but the material maybe don't maybe is not guided from that soul. Okay, so if the free will destroyed and indeterministic of free will is destroyed, we think that the interaction between the mind and brain is destroyed.
Yes, but I couldn't catch. I was just asking about a situation in which we know someone what should someone decide, but we know that he possesses free will as well, you know?
No, I think that I don't understand completely your question. Please again explain it.
Okay. Let me ask it later after others ask the question, you know?
Okay.
Thank you for the most recent talk. Yeah, so I have the same reaction. I tend to think I agree, but I have the same reaction that I had yesterday about not having a definition of free will. So if you don't have a rigorous definition of free will, then people who have said that you can have deterministic free will or other kinds of free will that aren't necessarily explicitly deterministic have not been ruled out. And so I think the place to start there again is John McCarthy. I was just visiting his web. Almost everything he ever wrote is maintained by Stanford University and is freely available. It's a little hard to find his longer account of free will, but he wrote a paper called Free Will Even for Robots. And he also wrote a shorter paper where he tried to make the idea behind that clearer. And then there's a long set of web pages that he never made into a paper or a book where he elaborates on his theory of free will for robots. And it is standard AI by definition. So it would be something that it would be valuable to me anyway if you could show that something like that on your definition of free will is not free will, then that would be a good thing, I would think. Otherwise, people will say you're just assuming something that you're not showing us that rules out standard AI being able to produce free will. And the compatibilist comment that was in chat is the same thing, right? And the only way to show a compatibilist that your version of free will, your definition of free, your version defined in some way, it doesn't, it doesn't succumb to this objection from the compatibilists saying, well, you do what you want. If you do what you want to do, for example, I don't see why you're not free, which people have said in so many words many times. So you have to, it seems like you need to show your definition.
Let me explain more accurate. We perceive such phenomena, we perceive free will as a first person experience. So the concept of free will and the property of free will needs to any proof and any definition at the first person experience. But the mechanism of free will, the mechanism of consciousness, the nature of that, we must, in science and philosophy, exploring that definition. So I ask you that which part of science or philosophy must be defined this first perception of free will? Please notice that before we write the science and philosophy, as a second knowledge, we have the first and the initial knowledge about ourselves, about free will of all, and about the consciousness. So after that perceive this concept, we explored and we try to modeling the nature from philosophical model, or but this nature maybe is in our free will, consciousness, and etc., or maybe in without. So we think that free will is very, very clear and obvious thing that we perceive, and we don't need to prove it. Okay. Also, there are many philosophical and scientific arguments that try to prove free will, but in the level of philosophical and scientific definition, I think that we must, because this is a philosophical subject, you don't, this science approach, the sense and empirical approach, laboratory, maybe Silicon laboratory or natural laboratory, you cannot argue that the free will is not exist. For example, if you refer to Libet's experiment, Libet itself say that it is not for ignoring the free will. It's talk about the nature that free will can act in the nature. Okay, so we think that erasing the because that we maybe have a different definition of free will, or because that it is very difficult to define the free will, we must erase this concept. I think that we try to at first in philosophical approach. When we go to philosophical approach, there are many philosophical schools. I focus on Islamic philosophical school, that free will is the main and important role in that. So we accept free will because to reason. One is I perceive, another because our argument in Islamic philosophy and such another philosophical school argue that free will exists. So in science, it is more comfortable that we accept the free will and try to understand the nature of that.
Yeah, no, I see, I understand. But you know, in science and engineering, you have to define things, and the only reason you have quantum, the only reason you have a physics for things that are very big in the case of relativity, and things that are very small in the case of quantum, and then mechanics, is you have math, you have definitions, you have theorems. Ultimately, you know, if you're crossing over to science, you have to minimally have some pretty decent definitions, I think. But you know, I you know, maybe I'm wrong. People have ventured definitions of free will that seem to me to be the kind of thing you're talking about, but I'm not sure because I can't inspect the definitions. You know, the Libet experiments don't have definitions. That's why they haven't gone anywhere. There's no rigor associated with them. And if you, from a logical point of view, if you formalize the experiments, you can prove that on many definitions of free will, the experiments are not inconsistent with free will. Yeah, I don't know, but I understand your point of view. Yeah, first person thing. So, but yeah, but that, you know, thank you.
Okay, let's excuse me. We have a model that can explain and can propose a mathematical and physical structure that free will can exist at that model. For example, our model of Arsenal theory of consciousness. At model, we can explain the mathematical structure that free will and the effectiveness of free will occurred in the nature. So when we have a mathematical and physical model, and we have philosophical arguments, we think that when the physical criteria that this theory explain for emergence of conscious behavior and free will behavior, when a material system, an artificial physical system leads to that complexity that we explain in details in our theory of science of consciousness. So this is an experimental approach that we can, in the laboratory, test that this model is true or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen that. All I see when people, not necessarily you, but others appeal to indeterminacy or indeterminism in the world of the very small in physics, just finding that phenomena and then stipulating that it's associated with action in the case of humans is by no means doing science. The first problem with that, as I said earlier, is that indeterminism has been taken for many decades minimally to be insufficient for free will. You have to have agency. An agent is not posited, okay? Even in the case of special relativity where we're coordinatizing, quote, agents, that is entirely metaphorical. It's not an agent in the sense of something that is causing the indeterminate events, the indeterministic events from the standpoint of physics that happen. You still need the agent to bring them about. So what I'm saying is, specifically now, that's what you need. And that's what, it's not just you, it's everybody who just blindly appeals to indeterminacy because physics gives us this in the quantum case. That's not sufficient. You have to have the concept of an agent, a decision, and action. Okay, and you have to show that the agents deciding to do something corresponds to some event that is meaningful in physics.
You are right, I agree with you. But the first point is that indeterministic in physics, in microscopic physics, in theory of consciousness, for example, Avicenna-Bohm, Oppenheimer's hammer, etc., can up to macroscopic physics. Okay, so indeterministic is not only microscopic phenomena. Another point is that this indeterminacy of physics opened the door for many possibilities that needs to choose for reality, for actualization reality. Which agents choose this one of these possibilities? Or the model of consciousness, science of consciousness, explain that mind as an immaterial thing, an immaterial essence can do this. But how this agent can choose one of possibility? For example, in our theory, the mind is a non-temporal entity, and this non-temporal entity lost concentrate on high level of reality that the function is analytical structure, and this leads lower level.
I'm sorry, your internet is cutting out to the point where we're missing what you're saying.
Yeah, but thank you. We'll move on. Thank you. Yeah. By the way, I've said this. I said the same things to Penrose at a dinner. You can just posit the brain uses quantum effects. Sure, great. We can posit things. Well, I want to see the theorems that are the counterpart to your work in mathematical physics that show me that. But anyway, but thank you. I really am on your side. I'm fundamentally in agreement with you. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Hamid.
Yeah, thank you. I want just to add a point to this very good discussion. I think definition and defining concepts is not the first step of exploring and modeling and understanding it. Because definition is directly depends on our worldview. Suppose one whose worldview is materialistic, has a materialistic worldview, want to define consciousness. How we define it? Free will, consciousness, life, these are hard problem, and we have some inner understanding, first person understanding about them, and this is enough to start exploring them with science, philosophy, and everything that we can use them to understand them. In quantum consciousness, I want to emphasize this. Quantum consciousness, as I said, is a revolution in cognitive science. Cognitive science study and explore nature in the classical point of view, but quantum consciousness has three bases: physics, quantum mechanics, neuroscience, and philosophy. Each four major theories that I mentioned in my presentation has these three bases, and we use these interdisciplinary theories to shed light on these hard problem: consciousness, free will, and so on. So first, I discussed 2 points. First, I said definition is not necessarily the first step of finding out and exploring things. And second, we should have a broader point of view and use modern physics, modern neuroscience, and especially quantum consciousness, use this capacity to shed light on these concepts. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hamid. Are you familiar? I assume you're familiar with integrated information theory and phi. Okay, so if you're not, that by far in computational neuroscience, cognitive science, this is by far the dominant theory, at least in the Western world. The entire edifice of integrated information theory is based on first-person axioms that they start with, okay? And they end up at a very different place than where you and I end up. But if you don't know it, you should, I think, take a look at it. What happens is, just like you're saying, they cross over from the first-person axioms to, at some point, coming up with definitions that can be operationalized and mathematized. And yes, the minute they do that, they end up at a very different place, and it's because of their definitions. So they kind of sneak in where they want to go. So if you're not familiar, take a look, but I noticed that.
Hi, so I appreciate this philosophical discussion, and from that discipline, I'm very much in sympathy with what Selmer is saying, but it's a multidisciplinary discussion. And as a psychologist, I get a bit restive with sort of binary distinctions here, whether humans are have free will or not. It seems to me some humans achieve more free will than others, and that's an effort and a bit of a struggle. All of us are to some extent constrained by our circumstances, but we can work towards a degree of freedom. Some people do that more than others. So that's a kind of psychological perspective. There are also theological issues. I think there's an interesting issue about the extent to which in the Christian tradition, Jesus had free will. I think it may not have been possible for Jesus to go against the will of the Father, and in that sense, he may not have had free will. And that's an extreme case of how in the spiritual path you kind of surrender some of your free will rather than making autonomous decisions all the time. So there are a lot of complexities here and perspectives from different disciplines.
Thanks. That might be a good point where we wrap up today then, because I think that a lot of the issues we've been looking at, I think there is nuance and there's a need to look at it from a variety of perspectives and disciplines. And I think that I have certainly learned a lot from the very different positions and disciplines and perspectives and traditions that people are bringing to this conference. So I'd like to thank everybody for your participation, for your questions, for your time. And then for the participants here that are panelists on the Zoom call, if you're able to, we're going to have a short time tomorrow to have some time for some conversation, some feedback, to talk about some next possible steps and things like that. So if you're able to join us, I believe a link should be out in the email now for that. And if not, we'll be in touch. And so thank you very much for these very productive past couple days.